okay, so episode 8. This will be the official start of episode 8, live from the what is your property called?
Meadowlark Manor.
Meadowlark Manor Studio.
Yeah, I like that. That's good with our icon. What do you call it? The Saint Bernard.
Yeah, and we're going to get some more icons because Trailhead Designs is through Trail Days now, and they will have time to print some stuff. So
awesome.
we need to talk about those exact things.
Branding and
we're gonna do
swag.
So here's a question for you. You know how when people say that if you see a certain animal, it means something in your life, which I can't think of one example off the top of my head.
Oh, like me, it's a great blue heron. I see great blue herons. It's associated with something happening that day.
All right. Well, so here's a question for you. I have seen 2 possums. 2 very live possums that have made eye contact with me today. So what does that mean?
I just feel sorry for you.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I love animals, but a possum is not one.
So the first one was pretty early in the morning, we'll say 4:30 as a round time, approximate time. So the dogs were barking outside, and I went outside near the compost, and I figured that's what was going on. And it was actually in a garbage can that was laying on its side. And I was a little worried that maybe something was wrong with it, but it was fine. But we made some eye contact there because I had a light on.
I mean, I don't know. I believe in signs, but I don't have any. Gosh, I'm running out of vocabulary today. I don't have any belief or idea that I can interpret what those signs are, as some connection.
Right.
I just figure I look out for something happening. Well, and that's interesting too, because I had one of these situations, and it happened twice in one day. My dad's been asking me to do get a couple things done for him around the house. He wants his driveway sealed and some repairs done. And I kind of have that way in the back of my mind because I'm like, what? But he's getting a little dementia and whatever, it'll make him happy. And so completely randomly, I'm like, I'll Google pavers, right? So I Google pavers before I'm getting ready to take Ren to school or do something. Just really spur of the moment. And one of them is Eller Paving, the maiden name of someone I know, and I mean, it's Eller. Their kid's name is Eller. I'm like, oh, Eller. Click on the website. It's got a little form you can fill out. So I don't have to call anybody. 30 seconds and I'm good. I'm taking Ren to school, I'm turning into where she works, and I look over my left, and I'm like, God, who paints their truck neon green? And there's 2 big, giant, gross neon green trucks with giant, big trailers in a row parking next to me. And I look at it, and on the side it says Eller Paving.
That's awesome.
Right? And then that day, something else happened. And then probably a third thing. I don't even know what it is, but what do those things mean? I don't know.
Yeah.
Something.
It's so funny. So Shelly and I were talking about... so she's traveled to Buffalo for a family event, and... she always carries this open-ended bag, an open-top bag for her toiletries and stuff. And she kind of used that for her carry-on for specific things. I was like, why don't you take one that zips?
It's a little more private.
And, just for ease, getting on and off. And, and her toiletries were actually in her suitcase this time, but it's just this open bag. Anyways, so she ended up taking this other kind of duffel bag thing. And then, of course... she looked at, we're on the phone talking about this, and then she looked down at she probably had her headset in, and she looked at her phone, and on Facebook, the advertisements were for duffel bags.
Not to try to one-up you, but do you know who Bob Haro is? So Bob Haro was one of the first bicycle freestyle guys. He created a company called Haro Bikes, which is still in existence.
Yeah, I know that name.
He was the Tony Hawk of sort of BMX freestyle, right? And I have this story where I had a Haro and it got stolen, and I wrote Bob a letter about, is there a way to buy new stickers? Because the people who stole my bike stripped it, and I got it back, but there was no stickers on it. And he actually wrote me back. This was 1985. Wrote me handwritten letter from Bob Haro. Oh, I know how that feels. I got my bike stolen when I was a kid. Long, a whole page. And he included a free set of stickers. And randomly on my Facebook feed, this Bob Haro thing shows up. And I'm like, oh, man, I'm going to tell this story because all these guys are talking about Bob Haro. And I told the story, and he liked it. Bob Haro liked it. And then today, this is 2 days ago, my buddy Willie, who also has this history of bicycles, texts me the same picture from Instagram that I was responding to on my feed. He's like, check this out. And I'm like, you're not going to believe this. The Matrix has now plugged us, you and I, together.
Yeah.
In this, codependent advertising.
That's amazing.
Well,
we're not that this show was supposed to talk about advertising at all, but the one I can't remember what book this is, but it might have been something just about the internet. The way we're so influenced by social media and advertising and stuff. But it talked about a father of a 16-year-old went into, I'm going to say Target. I'm not trying to throw them under the bus, but some store like that. I think it was actually Target. And he was mad, wanted to talk to the manager. Why is my daughter getting advertisements for things related to pregnancy and having a baby and stuff? And so he went in, mad, and
just watch the Social Dilemma, pal.
Needless to say, the reason was because the girl was pregnant. So she was looking for whatever.
Right,
so the way that tied in with their, the mechanism, the algorithms, whatever they use, right? So Target knew his daughter was pregnant before he did, basically.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's scary stuff.
It is scary.
But and I don't know if this has anything to do with what we're going to talk about today, but my take on that is the enabler side. Like, I'm not mad at capitalism for wanting to own our attention because that's how they make money. I mean, I am. I don't like that. I would change, if I was president, I'd be like, okay, this version of capitalism is trash. We are going to start fresh. Sorry, everybody. But I can't do that, and it's probably not a great idea. But it's the enablers. It's the people who, I don't know, follow that or do that or aren't aware that their attention is being manipulated and that they should sort of take a minute. You know, what we used to call critical thinking, right? I mean, that was a thing when I was in high school. Like, we needed to teach people to think critically.
Right.
And then and then it was almost like a joke, because if you thought critically, you were good. But if you didn't, you had a severe problem. And then somehow along the line, that just disappeared. And now it's been completely taken advantage of, and so we're all just enablers in this system of abuse.
Yeah, and do you feel, because I think a lot of times, man, I feel trapped in the system, and it's I know that I'm enabling it, but I feel kind of trapped in it.
Well, you can't exist outside of it. I wrote an article on Medium this week that said, I resist social media. Do I even exist? Right. So it's like I'm a conscientious objector to the system in a way, so I get nothing. So I have no roads, I have no video, I can't participate in any of that if I don't. There's no option, right? There's no second option. And so, yes, we're enablers, but I think there's a degree to which we can regulate our attention and sort of say no at some point. And, it's like the abused spouse who can't get out of the relationship. I understand that. I've been there in an emotionally abusive relationship, and you want to stay, but you can do things like, well, you can't hit me anymore, or I'm not going to sleep with you, or, whatever. You can put up some levels of resistance instead of just complete abandonment. And I'm sure you do that just by being aware of it.
Yeah.
If you're aware that your attention is being manipulated, you necessarily will resist it to a degree.
Yeah. Well, I mean, absolutely. I think that's it, because you said regulate our attention.
Yeah.
And that's awareness then. Right?
Yeah, right.
You're aware of what is your attention on, and aware of it. And I mean, that's just that. I mean, that's the key. And it's crazy though, because it's easy to become blinded by it. And there's two examples, and one is worse than the other, I think. And so and anybody could have these, and one practically everybody does. And so on a personal level, as I'm a Cleveland Browns fan. I listen to a Cleveland Browns podcast. And it took me a little while to realize that it's by the Cleveland Browns. It's not Chris and Paul,
right.
Cleveland Browns fans, talking about the Browns and going and having it has real bias, and they are selling me a product, and they want me to believe that they're going to be really good. Now, I think they do try to temper it a little bit and regulate it a little bit, but obviously they have to be they are clearly careful about what they say.
Yeah, but they're cool about
it.
They're not like, listening to the Browns is going to make you, a genius.
And right, and so I think they do try to offer fair criticisms of the team.
Yeah.
But now, worse than that though is the whole mainstream news.
Oh, yeah.
And
I mean,
it's
gone.
It's gone, and it's basically news is just one big advertisement, and they're selling you your general like your baseline, kind of where you operate from, right?
Yeah,
like
yeah.
that they are selling you that,
right?
And
this is exactly what that Brian Schumgarter, I'll put it in the show notes, was talking about, how it's a race to the bottom to give you the most immediate dopamine hit. And so once and he uses the example of Hostess and McDonald's, the fast fooding of America. It's like you can get your basic Maslowian needs met of food at McDonald's. You can do it quick and cheap. Or you can grow your own vegetables and prepare them and go through all this mess and get the same reward over a longer period of time. But it's a delayed gratification dopamine hit. And so what these companies do is sort of manipulate us by giving us the cheapest, easiest dopamine hit right now. And we've all become accustomed, and I would say addicted, to that. And so to sort of backtrack on what I said before.
Addicted to dopamine.
To the race to the bottom, to the cheapest, the pornification of, the difference between porn and sex and like lovemaking with your partner. This race to the bottom thing is giving you the crappiest version of whatever you think, because that's what gives you the quickest hit. And again, to take the burden of enabling off of our shoulders, it isn't easy. This is a huge. It's like they say this dopamine social media enabling relationship may be more addictive than heroin, and so it's not on the burden of us just to all of a sudden figure out how to stop enabling this neo-capitalistic whatever. It's hard. It's just that we got to be aware of it in the first place.
And so does that create our addiction to dopamine? Well,
that's millions of years of evolution. You can't tease that apart. You can't. Right. I got to quit that. Well, you maybe. This guy that runs the psychology podcast, Scott, I can't remember his name. He talks about there being actual two levels of dopamine neurology, where there's like the cheap ones, and then there's the ones that actually are connected to more meaningful things. And so it's not just one thing that you can get, but that you can actually neurologically learn to get dopamine hits off of eating a healthy diet, exercising, being a good person. That you can actually. But once you fall victim to the McDonald's effect, it becomes really hard. So
so a couple things. One is just for the hopeful listeners. The what you're talking about there is called the Psychology Podcast.
Yeah,
we'll put that in the show notes. And then on Metaphysical Milkshake with Rainn Wilson and Reza Aslan, they just did one. Well, I don't remember how long. I think it was just this past March, though. But it was with, it was titled, "Are We All Addicted to Dopamine?"
Oh, yeah, Gabor Mate.
Yeah, no, this was Anna. I'm going to call it Anna Lembke.
Oh, yeah. I just listened to that
8th.
one. Yeah, that one. I just listened to that one.
So if you, for anybody that wants to get deeper dives on both of those are some good podcasts to check out on this stuff then.
Yeah, and I think the solution, for me, I get... I don't want to create any existential angst or dystopian futures, because I think the solution for us as individuals is simple awareness, like we talked about. I wrote an article on Medium this week, not about this specifically, but about how meditation, for me, once I got past all the BS and the resistance and thinking it was going to make me levitate and all this stuff and just sort of did it.
It doesn't make you levitate.
I can't levitate.
There's no chair under me.
I can't do it. I'm actually upside down right now, but I've tricked your brain. Once I sort of said, I'm just going to do it and not have any judgment or values or wants or needs or anything associated to it. I'm just going to try it with no strings attached. What it did is it helped me buy these moments in time where now I see a Facebook feed and I go, this is the algorithm. The first thing I think is not, oh yeah, Trump should die or whatever. I think, I'm being manipulated. Right. And that's what meditation has done for me, is it just added this little millisecond of time in between my assessment of judgment and, some reaction or whatever. You know what I mean? And I think that is I'd pay for that. If you'd have told me 20 years ago that I could, learn to do that,
right?
And that these would be the results, and this is what it would feel like, I would have started meditating a long time ago. assuming that that's what caused it. I mean, it might not be directly causal. It could be a whole bunch of different changes in my behavior that have led to this. But now I feel like I have a choice in the world. Kind of to your point of just falling victim to this thing and attaching to the identity politics and all the things that we do with the memes and the algorithm. I have freedom, right?
Right.
Of how I'm going to react to it.
Yeah. Well, so in that freedom, because that's a whole topic. I mean, we weren't necessarily planning to talk about that today, but so I think it's funny that we in the U.S. and probably other countries too, but we see so much about our freedoms and our rights, right?
That rugged individualism thing we talked about.
And that's related, yeah, certainly. And I think we mistake the freedoms that we truly desire, right?
Yeah.
And so we mistake that, and it goes back, we were talking about this in the previous episode, where it's like, it's not, maybe it was the last one actually, it's not just do absolutely what you please, hedonistic, do anything you want. Mm-hmm. That's not true freedom, really, you know? Mm-hmm. And so part of the freedom, I think that's a complicated subject, but one aspect of it that is super important is it's freedom from your own judgments. Right?
Oh yeah,
like it's like
these automatic.
Right. Yeah. So reactions. You freed yourself from your automatic reactions, and so I think it was Neil Donald Walsh. Since you used the word reaction, it's good. I think Neil Donald Walsh uses, and if it's not him, it's somebody like that. That it says instead of react, REACT, create. CREAT.
Wow, that's great.
He's really good at doing stuff like that. And so instead of reacting in the moment, you create in the moment.
Yeah. That's what we're doing.
Right. And then of course, you know, on the greater scale of that is then when we all create what is possible. Like, and that's the endless possibilities. And this is what we've talked about, like the eternal moment of now is when all the past merges with the endless possibilities of future, and endless possibilities are what we can create. So what do we want to create?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Somebody in a podcast I listened to recently referred to this thing as like I talk about values a lot and like knowing your values and using those as filters to just say, should I do this? Should I not do this? Well, does this agree to my values? If I'm prioritizing stuff, well, where does this fall? Oh, this is like not really a value of mine, so I'm going to not say no to this, and I'm going to move on to this thing. Does it help us as a way to help us navigate our lives by being aware of our values and how they change? This person applied that concept to a worldview.
Okay.
And sort of said, you know, we do that as societies, as groups, as, you know, like one could say as like political parties in the U.S., and sort of we define these global level values. Like you're saying, we create this reality. And then we all sort of agree to do it. But the way that happens now is not what you just described. It's like one person defines it and gets a whole bunch of people to believe in it to enable that system to sort of use the language we used earlier, rather than us getting together and going, well, what do we really value? Do we really value like posting a bunch of crap on Facebook and then fighting about it? Or have we thought about this?
Yeah.
Like, is there a way to introduce that sort of organization to the world? Or did it used to be that way?
Yeah. Well, so I think part of that maybe is the idea to become aware that you have these values, and maybe the thing to think about before that is you have a hierarchy of the way you operate on a daily basis, whether you know it or not. Right?
That's a big one.
So you constantly are making decisions of what to do, right? So you could consciously, or in other words, you create your day. Would be a way to say that.
Right.
Like you create your day because it's like these are the things that I want to really be important to me. I'm going to. My family is my first priority, right? So I'm going to take care of their needs and be present with them, and I'm going to show them that I want to be with them. Like one thing like I always try to do with my wife is when I first see her come back, like if I'm coming home or she's coming home, when I first see her, to be very present and be very like, hey, I'm with you right here, right now, and see you and what's going on, and be there. If I hear her come in the door. Now, there's times I don't even hear her come in the door or whatever, if I'm in the back with headphones on or something. So obviously that happens. But try to be very present. So that's kind of like the hierarchy of everything in mind. Like, I'm going to try to do that ahead of other things. And then, of course, I always think, owning a gym, I think the physical aspect of life is the base but easiest thing to control.
It's a
right?
great.
What are you putting in your body, and are you taking care of it? Are you going for walks? Are you working out, or doing whatever? And it doesn't have to be necessarily working out in the gym specifically. You're doing some sort of active work.
It's the value. Are you applying that value somehow?
And so everybody makes these values. I think they have this hierarchy and they don't know about it. Before we even talk about values, right?
That unawareness thing.
And it's like, so somehow you have to start realizing, like, okay, I'm making a decision. And it's just, and it could be real simple. Like, if you are late for work every single day, okay, like, you've made that decision. Like,
that's nobody else's fault but yours.
And I know that there's always going to be the situations where you legitimately got stopped by a train.
When it happens every day.
Legitimate.
When it is the pattern.
Right. You're deciding that. Right. So what do you can change that.
Well, and that's a good example. I had a student one time. She was a undergraduate, maybe like a second year undergraduate in college, taking my biology lab that I was teaching, and she was always late. And in order to get the students there on time, I gave a quiz. Right, like it starts at 10 o'clock, and you get 5 minutes to do it. So if you're late, tough shit. You don't get to take the test. And she missed a couple tests and was like complaining. And I said, "Look, what's your deal?" She's like, "Well, I just can't. I leave and I get in traffic and I can't." And I'm like, "Okay, what time are you leaving the house?" She's like, "Well, I'm leaving at 9:30." I'm like, "Leave at 9:40, 9:15. Leave 15 minutes. Get it in your mind right now to set your internal clock back 15 minutes earlier." From that day, and I kind of felt like I was being rude, like I was blowing her off. From that day on, she was never late. And I saw her like 2 years later, and she was kind of like, it's amazing. Like, once you told me that, it changed my life. I'm never late to anything anymore. And I'm just like,
right.
And but it never occurred to her.
So simple.
That it was even within her responsibility. It was somebody else's problem. Somebody else's fault.
Well, I think it's funny on so when you own your own business, and of course you've been, owned your own business and stuff. And when you own your own house, it's like you can walk by something and it's on the floor and it's just like, well, you going to pick that up or is it going to stay there?
Right.
And you can judge your own house. And obviously like dust on your furniture on your shelves or whatever, that's one thing. But do you have, literal, what would be going to the trash can, so garbage, laying on the floor? Well, you've made that decision. So just start doing it. And this is kind of funny because I started thinking about, sometimes I feel like life is such a video game that in my mind, and it's arbitrary, there's no actual system to this, although maybe I should actually make one and see how many points I can make. But I give myself points in my head for each thing I do. Like bathroom garbage, 5 points. Other bathroom garbage, 5 points. Full garbage, 20 points.
I'm shocked that there's not a therapy methodology that isn't a video game. I think there are. I think there are apps, like mental health apps and exercise apps, that basically treat it like a video game. So that you're doing something and then entering it into the app, and it's a game. So that you're getting points, you're getting these dopamine rewards like you would in a video game because it's such a familiar model. But I just thought of something going back to this idea that it's our responsibility, and we have to. Some people are wandering through the world blaming all their problems on other people. Some people are willing. That's hard, right? It's a lot easier to live in a, ignorance is bliss type of way. So I guess you can't make everybody do that. But then there are some people, I guess, like us, probably our listeners, that are aware. And, once you're aware, it kind of like it sucks. It's over, because then you start to beat yourself up if you don't do these things. You can't look at that trash anymore and be like, oh, it's cool. Because, now you have this thing where you're like, I'm a slob or whatever it is. And so there's some danger there for creating some neuroses even, unless you figure out how to make it a positive. And then at this next level, I think is sort of where we wanted to go today. Maybe we still can, of as a group, as some sort of subgroups of more than one person sort of making these kind of decisions. Now we have to understand everybody else at the same time. Not only do we have to be aware of what we're doing and what our values are and sort of make that leap, but now we got to sort of consider that. Well, not everybody's just going to line up. And I think we make that mistake. We go, well, I'm this way, and anybody that's just like me is cool, and everybody else sucks. Well, you haven't. It's like you were saying about different levels. You know, you may have made a step up, but you just made a couple of steps back.
Yeah.
And so is there something to this group approach to living, admitting that we live in a group and understanding each other that's critical?
Yeah. Okay. So God, you touched on so many things. I feel like we've touched on a lot too. I just want to go back to when we talked about like freedom for a little bit.
Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah. Sure.
And just specifically, what I said about that in my book actually was, wisdom is found in freedom. Freedom from the negative aspects of the ego mind. Freedom from the attachments, assumptions, expectations, and desires that create the illusion of separation. I'm not sure we've talked about illusion of separation on here, but we can.
Well, that's related to what I just said, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's part of...
And then, and just to finish this real quick, there's only 2 more lines.
Yeah.
Freedom is liberation from these negative aspects that the ego mind can produce. It could be said then that freedom is found in detachment. And you hear a lot of the word detachment thrown out. Like we need to detach ourselves. And the difference is between detachment and apathy. Those are not, you don't become apathetic.
Mm-hmm.
You detach yourself
Yeah.
from the things that you cannot control. You can only control yourself. You know, I don't know if we've talked about it at all. And I'm not a Gandalf like I don't,
expert.
Yeah, I don't watch it, but there's.
None shall pass.
Have you? Or is that like in your wheelhouse?
Kind of. I mean, I like the Lord of the Rings.
So
read the books and watched the movies.
Okay, and it's a quote that it says something like, you know, it wasn't in our control to live through it, but we did live through it. It wasn't our choice to live through it.
Yeah, I know but we did it. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna try to find that real quick here.
Well, yeah, and I mean, attachment is probably a big part of the root of what makes all the things we've been talking about today difficult. Because we attach to what I would argue are the wrong things. You know, it's like we're picking elements from the Matrix and saying, you know, this is wrong and this is going to be the soapbox, the sword I'm going to die on. But really, that's just a created element of what Don Miguel Ruiz would call the dream.
Yeah, right.
You know, it's just a bad dream.
Once again, like 38 things to talk about.
Well, yeah, I mean, I was just talking while you were looking up the Gandalf.
Yeah, no, it's perfect. So the quote is, or I guess it's from the book, Lord of the Rings.
Tolkien.
I wish it need not have happened in my time, said Frodo. So do I, said Gandalf, and so do all who live to see such times. But that is not for them to decide. All we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given to us.
Well, that's what you said earlier. It's the present, the past, and the infinite possibilities. I mean, you can't control either side of it.
Yeah, and so you have this moment to create it. And so now, if whatever the times we're living in are not what we want, what do we do about it? And I think then I know that people want like big answers, like that, like this is the way to do it. But it always starts with yourself. And unless you get yourself, I want to say under control, basically. You could think of, you got to get your ego under control, and that's all those attachments. And again, the 5 levels of attachment from Don Miguel Ruiz Jr. book, the authentic level. That would be ideal if we could all live at that level where we are not judging anything, right? Okay, and so we've stopped judging, or we don't judgment. Okay, that's the most authentic level. There's no judgment. It's just the experience of life.
Utopian.
And it probably is utopian to a degree, but that's something to always. I think
it's a target. Yeah, exactly.
Right? If we're not striving for that, and it's just the same as, so for a person that identifies themselves as a Christian, they by definition, then believe that they are going to go to heaven, okay? And that's an existence. It's going to be a place that they experience, right? So there's some degree, the only way we can relate to it at all is there's going to be some degree of consciousness. There's an awareness there. Something is going on for them to be in heaven. Okay, so you have to be there. Well, then that is your goal. That is your goal. That's
right,
your utopian vision. What will that be like? Well, somehow, I mean, and of course, is it beyond our physical matter, right? It's like the Yoda, like we are more than this crude matter, right? So if we're more than that, what would that be? What's the state? How do we interact with each other? How do we treat each other in that state? Okay, that's all complicated.
Well, I just want to answer. I don't think Christians do that. I think they go, I'm going to heaven, end of story. Mm-hmm. I don't think what you just said, that's for people like us.
Yeah, well,
you just go, okay. I mean, and maybe I'm totally underselling religion, but what I've seen in my life is like zero thought about what it actually looks like or what it is or what it means or any of that.
Right. Well, and that's what's so important, dude. Is
right.
It's like, okay, fine. You can, if this is exactly what you believe.
You're going to heaven.
You're going to heaven, and that's what you believe. Now, what does that actually mean for being there? And then let's try to do that here.
And that process of questioning it is awareness. Now you're aware of it. Now you're thinking about it. Now you actually might come up with some creative thought that pushes up against that idea and opens you up to, oh, well, what do other people do? Or like, well, what else is there? You know what I mean? Well, like maybe, what did you just say? What was the last thing you just said? Did you write it down?
No, I don't think I did.
Yeah, I mean, that's the next direction.
So, just to stay on this line just a little bit, is I think we mistake, because this goes with freedoms. It's the same mistake we make. Yeah. Humans make the same mistake. So we even if we don't sit around and consciously really think deeply about what would heaven mean,
right?
Okay, right. The Christian heaven,
or whatever tenet we subscribe to or believe in.
Even though we don't really think about it, we tend in that direction, and I think so. Again, I'm painting with broad stripe, brushes here. Is okay. So the Christian person that identifies themselves as going to a heaven, there's going to be a state of being there. Now, honestly, for me, I don't identify myself as Christian, Muslim, Jewish, Hindu, or any other religion personally, right? But I also don't identify myself as an atheist or agnostic.
Right, not that.
I don't identify myself as any of those things. The closest thing I identify myself to anything is Cleveland Browns fan. I mean, that's it, right?
Shelley's husband.
And that's that's true, right? And I mean that, but anybody that knows like our relationship, there's no
right.
It doesn't even need. I'm with Shelley. Yeah. There's no need to be called a husband or wife. Yeah. I mean, other than just that's the term to identify that we use because we're limited by language here, and that's what it is.
Well, and it's
So I think we try to create. So we think like there's two things: the freedoms on earth that we think of them as our rights. Like our rights of what to do, like I'm going to be free. Mm-hmm. But the freedom we want is this freedom from, again, the negative aspects of the ego mind. So we got to have the ego mind to exist because that's the way we experience it.
Right, but we can manage it for less bad.
And so we got, and that's our goal. That's where we always got to get back to is I want to create the least amount of suffering, bad, negative things that I can influence, right? Now, and again, we talked about that being so complicated. But the other thing is I think that we try then, this idea of heaven, okay, so I'm in heaven, and again, or just an afterlife if that's what works for you. But there's some state that like a lot of people always think that like it's like, well, I'm going to see all my loved ones. Mm-hmm, great. Mm-hmm. And I love that idea. I would love to see everybody that I've loved, okay, that has passed away. My father and my aunts and grandma and grandpa. And then, I mean, do I get to see my...
your pets.
Well, my pets, and do I get to see my grandma and grandpa on my father's side, who I never met?
Oh yeah, and like the Eve.
Yeah,
you can go back to our common ancestor and be like, appreciate you.
And that's all so complicated to think. But then, it's like we kind of do, and we also think of it as like, so like it's going to be so beautiful. You'll see like a Facebook post, and it'll be, some beautiful vista
yeah, the sun shining
Sweden or whatever,
yeah.
and it's like, it's heaven on earth. Yeah, it is. It is heaven on earth because wherever you're at, you have the chance to create heaven. And I'm not ignoring the fact that there's horrible things going on in the world. I mean, I'll list.
Well, Viktor Frankl in The Man's Search for Meaning. I mean, he made heaven, or his approximation of it, in a concentration camp. So we do have the capacity to
he
overcome really bad things. It's been shown.
He made the most of what it was, and so we're not belittling or ignoring any of the real disasters that are going on, created by humans, let alone beyond our power. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, tornadoes and earthquakes and hurricanes and stuff like that. Yeah. Like volcanoes erupting, like stuff that is way beyond our scope. Although we probably are influencing those pretty strongly with the weather, right, on lots of reasons. But those existed before there was any influence.
Yeah, right.
Right. Okay. So that now, if we're impacting the intensity, we could argue that all day.
Yeah, I mean that there's just hard knocks in the world. Things happen.
Well, so I think so with this idea of heaven, and I want to see everybody. It's like we kind of want things like that, and so now, like, I mean, we have Zoom. Like and FaceTime, right? And you can see somebody like around the world and be with them. Now that can't cross into another dimension yet.
Yeah, death is death. Yeah, I mean, I just don't get that. I don't have any. This isn't in my vernacular. Thinking about heaven, I really, honestly, I'm lost.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting then because, dude, it's like it's because that's not where you grew up. But how many people? I mean, there's probably 1.5 to 2 billion Christians in the world that identify as Christians. I'd say there's 1.5 billion to 2 billion Christians and Muslims in the world. Okay.
But the Christian number is dwindling fast, I think, from what I understand.
Yeah, well, I don't know, but anytime you're over a billion, does that even matter?
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, right. It's only 1.1 billion.
There's so many, but so we're identifying ourselves as something that we think we're going to away. But what does that really mean? And it just doesn't matter because we are here now. You can this utopian. It might be utopian, but let's shoot for that. Like where we don't. I want as little suffering as can be. Yeah. Right. And I want to inflict, so to speak, as little suffering on anybody as can be. And again, we've talked about that. It's so complicated with eating animals and that suffering on a being.
But at some level, I think we could quickly cross off some things from that list. Mm-hmm. Should we kill each other? Well, right. Okay, maybe sometimes as a form of punishment, but let's just put that to the side. As a regular rule, when we're going to Walmart, let's make a rule that we don't kill each other. Right. And it would get harder and harder as you narrow those things down. But I mean, it wouldn't be hard to come up with a set of common values.
Yeah, and so we're pointing
or descriptors of this heaven or this heaven on earth or.
Well, so
freedom.
So somebody, my mom would instantly go into, it's like, well, that's the Ten Commandments.
Well, yeah, that's so right. There have been attempts at this in the past, yeah.
And I think the problem, though, is, and you touched on it already, because, let's just go with let's not kill anybody. All right. Mm-hmm. And then immediately you kind of even put a caveat on it. Like maybe, if it's abortion. A punishment or something. Well, let's not even go there yet. But just it's a punishment or it's a retaliation.
Actually, I'm comfortable with it being a flat rule. You can't kill anybody.
Right. Okay.
Now we have to define what a body is, but that's a different.
Yeah. Right. So so I think a lot of people, though, on one hand, will say it is a flat rule. It's God's rule. Thou shalt not kill anybody. Mm. Okay, but then they'll be okay with I'm going to protect myself in self-defense.
Yeah, right. Or this guy stole a burger, so we should.
That's kill him. Not an absolute. Then it is not an absolute, and it's like so. If you want it to be an absolute, it's either an all or nothing.
And it's not democratic. There's no consensus with God. He's a dictator. He's an autocrat or whatever. I mean, that's not. A lot of people on Earth aren't going to be cool with that. So we can't use that as our model. He could have a seat at the table, which is the problem with religion, right? Is it's everybody's allowed to worship their own thing, But the second, it should be comma, but also consider everyone else's religions. Not say I trump all of you.
Well, and I don't even know. It's funny because you just went back to.
I don't want to make that tangent necessarily, but
this is what we were going to talk about today in our plan for Bachelor is the idea of reverse the roles.
Right, okay. There's other people in the world.
Yeah, that you have to
who modify necessarily your freedom, if you want to use those terms, and your capacity to create. You've got to consider. You can't ignore the fact there are other people in the world. Right. We're sharing the planet. Period. There's no discussion to be had. Anyway.
Right. Yeah. Right. I mean, so that's true, and I mean that's like a hard. I don't want to call that a fact, but that is like a law that we are.
I think it's up real high. I have awareness. There are other people.
Right. Yeah, we share. So we share in the world no matter what, whether we like to or not. And again, we've talked about this before. If nothing else, if somehow you had to come into this world with a mother and a father, so in terms of the way it would start, if nothing else, and in this time you're not going to get left with nothing, no clothes, and survive. Yeah. Like no baby can do that. Like, so you could get left that way. I mean, and I'm sure there's horrific stories, right, of the baby being just left, maybe naked, right?
It happens all the time.
If that baby is not found by another human who is sharing the planet, that baby is not going to make it.
Well, it's like, I don't know whether you call them rules or tenets or laws, but there's certain biological constraints to life on Earth.
Right.
And one is that I think the first click on that, I exist is I am an individual and I am a part of this. And anything that happens, that's like the second break in the reality ladder.
Right. So with that, then the skill that I talk about in my book is reverse the roles, and everybody knows this rule. It's just, I mean, they might call it something different, and that's totally fine. The easiest one is just to walk a mile in another person's shoes or moccasins or whatever you want. Right.
Empathy.
Empathy is
a way to just talk about it.
Right. Absolutely. And so, and to really do it, though, to truly understand the other person's perspective. And this is where, because this goes towards the, what we could call like the authority problem, right? Who's right, and how do you know who's, right?
Right.
And then what we've talked about a couple times is everybody thinks they're right. And it's like when you definitively think that you are right and everybody else is wrong, that you've shut down.
Yeah, you're in the wrong. Yeah. You're not operating in an equanimous system. You're not playing right.
Right. Yeah. Right. And it's like, and again, if you are right, and you're attacking the other person, well, you're missing that aspect, right? Because it's like, would you want to be attacked on something that you are not, fully aware of? And I think the problem, though, is that so many people just want everything to be this or that.
Well, and I think that's where the rules need to come into play. We don't know how to play well together.
Right.
And I think a lot of it, to go back to what we talked about before, is the race to the bottom, easiest dopamine hit. The easiest dopamine hit to deal with the very complex problem of dealing with other people you don't possibly like is to fall on your sword, or to take whatever explanation makes it all go away. What makes it all go away? I'm not you. I believe in this. Therefore, you're wrong. I'm right. End of it. I'm done. I don't have to deal with it anymore. That buys me the freedom. It's the race. It's the McDonald's. It's the Hostess Twinkie. I'm not hungry anymore. I don't have to deal with this problem of being able to relate to somebody anymore. So it's the cop-out. And that's taking the easy route out is the fundamental issue. We all do it. We're not aware of it, right? We don't even know we're doing it. Nobody's ever called us on it. It's the easy way out. We don't want to deal with the alternatives because they're hard. Until we do that, we can't get past. You can't really reverse the roles unless you're willing to be wrong and uncomfortable and awkward and try harder. And we just don't do that. We go, what's the quickest possible? Oh, red.
Right.
It's red. I'm done.
Yeah.
I'm not willing to consider that it's purple.
Yeah, right. So, so
does that make sense?
I mean, literally. So what you're saying, right, is it's controlled literally by dopamine. is because that's
well,
the
in this
hit
case,
we-
I'm not sure. I think it's fear that's probably related to dopamine. In the absence of dopamine, we're uncomfortable and afraid of the
Okay.
complexity and the difficulty. But if there's something that gives us a reward, we go, oh, this must be right. I'm right. I think I'm right because I feel right. Mm-hmm. So I think dopamine's probably. In this case, I don't think it's necessarily that simple because there's behavior and things we've learned and the big dream and avoidance of discomfort all mixed in there.
Well, so I think it's safe to say that we won't fully talk about reverse the roles today, but I like where we've gone with most of this. And let me just ask you this.
I mean, that's a good one to spend 30 minutes on.
Yeah, the parental aspect of, so it's like, okay, so individually, we definitely tend towards, in the world today, we tend towards wanting the easy solution.
It's
Right.
human.
Okay.
I mean, I'm not saying that's bad.
God, is that like almost like have to do with like like a law of conservation of energy?
Yeah,
for
it's
like
the
ourselves? Like,
water
we're gonna-
takes the path of least resistance.
Yeah,
unless there's a reason, an incentive to go the hard way, we're not going to do it.
Right. Okay.
And the
So-
incentive is we all got to get along.
Yeah, right. And so, so the reason to not just always go these ways, because things aren't really working the way we want individually, and
Yeah.
the earth is far
What-
from any ideal of a heaven.
What I do is I go, war exists. Social justice, find something in this
yeah.
pile of shit
Right.
that makes you uncomfortable.
Right, yeah, right. So there's
That's the
there's
reason.
stuff, right. There's stuff that makes us is not right.
Yeah,
It's
that
not,
we could improve.
It's not. So we're far from. I mean, dude, I think you have to link heaven and the idea of a utopia together.
Yeah, you have to have a target, like you
Yeah.
said before.
That-
Not something we want to actually achieve.
Or
but a
maybe it's not
guidepost.
achievable on Earth, but like let's point towards
Right,
it.
right,
Like
right.
that's the direction we're going.
And-
All right, so let me ask you this though, like just to get on a specific thing, and we've talked a little bit about parental aspects. I find it interesting that the things that happen is the generation, one generation thinks that the younger generation is not as smart, right? And it wasn't as hard as that for them, right?
Yeah, I guess
Okay,
so.
so that that's a tendency, and we think like kids are more entitled, and that goes back. I think we maybe shared that like quote like a while ago that a lot of times it gets linked to like Socrates, and I could only trace it back to like the late 1800s, which is still a long time ago,
yeah.
right? Okay, so it's like you think. Like it's not the last 20 years. that
Right,
kids are
200 years
entitled.
is a long
They
time.
thought that it was, people thought that then, and it probably went further back than
Yeah,
that.
what is
truthfully.
the
And there's a quote with Socrates, and I'll find it here in a second, to talk about.
the gist of it?
But just basically that kids these days are entitled and they don't have respect.
Oh,
and
every
things,
generation
forth.
thinks
Right.
that. Yeah, okay, gotcha.
Okay,
gotcha.
so that's a tendency. But here's the thing. The generation that has, when you have kids, like what generation was not trying to make the world better for their kids in some way?
Mm-hmm,
And as technology has multiplied our technology, as technology has multiplied our capacity to produce things, we do have to work less and less, which is a whole topic to get into. But like as a parent, how do you balance that? Because it's not like maybe a grandparent goes, I'm going to spoil my grandkids. But I've never heard a parent say that I purposely tried to create a spoiled, entitled brat, right?
Yeah, right.
And but
right, we mean the intent is good.
yeah, right. The intent is good, and so why? I mean, so you have you have children. I mean, how did that play a part in your life?
Intent is great. Except for the fact that it's complicated by all kinds of other variables that trump intent, right? I want to be comfortable. I don't want to have pain. I want to take the path of least resistance. All of these things factor into parenting. So a lot of things you do, like the classic cliche of the kid crying in the grocery store. Everybody looks at this parent and judges them for not being able to control their kid from crying. A lot of parents will do whatever it takes to make that go away. I'll buy you a candy bar. I'll buy you a toy if you'll quit crying. And then the kid, of course, figures out if it acts up. And we all judge that parent and say, you're a terrible parent for doing that. You should have taken... But all that parent wanted to do was make it stop. And so it wasn't thinking about how do I raise the best kid and how do I teach the. Obviously, we do that thousands of times a day as parents because we're human. Nobody wants to talk about that stuff. But so, what we teach our kids is complicated by the moment that we're living in and our inability in that moment because we're so overwhelmed to see the past or the future. So all we're thinking is right now this is going to work.
How do I fix this right now?
I don't know what this. I'm training this kid to be good. It's 2022. In 2030, I don't know what 2030 is going to be. What makes me think I can predict the future? What makes me think I have any? I mean, I'm not the one to ask because my idea of parenting is that we have a tiny nature versus nature influence on this kid. Are they clothed? Are they not bruised? Are they sleeping? We have covered it. I'm a good parent because they're not dead.
Yeah.
That's our goal. There's so much DNA and other environmental. I think it's absurd that parents think they have control over who their parent's going to be. So that's me. I don't do a lot of that. I don't associate me saying or doing something as to being translating into them actually becoming a certain type of person, because to me that's just absurd. So I think we do this every day with people, like the parenting, the generalistic sort of description of parenting, how we treat, and this idea that I know better than them or that they're entitled. I admit I have no idea. They're in a different time. 2022 to them is what 1986 was to me. They're completely different. There's so few similarities that it's meaningless to make the comparison. And so for me, I find a lot of freedom in being hands-off. A lot of people might call that lazy or irresponsible, but I mean...
Well, so, it's interesting then. I mean, so if because you feel like then you're more hands-off, and so I'm guessing...
But I'm not. I'm very present. I just don't have specific...
Well, so I guess, is that the idea of then you are not a helicopter parent. And that doesn't mean...
I try not to be.
Right. And so the helicopter parent, I guess, is...
They micromanage their kids' behavior in real time action, in hopes that it will influence their behavior in the future.
What's so interesting about that to me, so now I don't have kids, but it's generally speaking, it is people of my generation, which is you fall into. It's parents in that generation that have created that became helicopter parents.
Oh yeah, it's a new thing, right?
Right, it's new. And what's interesting is why did this generation then create that when, specifically we were living as children in the safest time.
Yeah, with the least amount of active parenting.
Yeah,
it's the opposite.
And why did it become such a control thing?
It's because we don't know what we're doing as humans, right? And so to me, the whole parenting thing is everybody I know parents the opposite of the way they were parented in order to try and not do what our parents did. Because we're all rebelling against, because that's the most fundamental way humans behave. I don't like that. I'll do the opposite of that. Because there's so much infinite, like you were talking about, there's infinite futures. I don't have any idea. I'm completely alone, but I don't want to admit that I'm not right. So I have to have the perception of being smart and right and attached to this idea that my identity as a parent is all tied up into this. And so what am I going to do?
So is it safe to say then that, for a lot of people probably, they felt that their parents or parent or person that raised them was either one of two things or both, I guess combo, is they were so controlling of things that now we're going to try to be more laissez-faire.
Yeah, like me.
And just let it go. Yeah. Or that they've... I've totally lost where I was going with that. That it was, I guess, controlling and structure was what I was going to say.
And absent.
Or absent,
so
right? That would be the thing.
That
they were absent, so they want to be present for it. That the parent wasn't there for them. And that's probably true, because it would probably be... mainly, again, generally speaking, we're both turning 50 this year, that our parents' generation was and my parents are a little bit older too, but I guess it's a bit...
it fits. Anybody right now between 60 and 80.
Would be the parents that had to work two jobs for the first time.
Yeah, it had...
Right, because prior to that...
And had these freedoms of money. for the first time. I mean, they were born in the Great Depression. Their parents were like, you can't ever have anything. You go out and make a bunch of money. And so our parents' generation was all about the fresh realization of this fake freedom. Okay, we have money. Right. We can do the things. I got the picket fence. I got the nice car. I got the big house. I put my kid in college. I did all the things my parents couldn't do. I won. But you forgot about all the other, we only learned one thing at a time.
Yeah.
And we're so slow.
Right.
In avoiding.
That's such an important thing.
That's a whole
to talk about still. I mean, I think I'd like to.
Well, when I heard you say parenting the first time, I hear sort of, again, not literally a biological offspring and their birth, whatever, like parenting the younger generation, parenting each other, this as part of this reverse the roles relationship of sort of, okay, I understand you. I have some strengths. I can see some weaknesses. Let me parent. It's a very IFS-y kind of thing. I mean, I think that's when I hear parent now, I hear it in an IFS kind of way, and in an internal family systems kind of way of just a relationship, maybe not literal.
Right, yeah.
And think about it. That's what mentors do, right? If somebody can be my mentor, they can identify a weakness in me for which they have a strength, and they can help me grow. I mean, that's a parenting relationship.
Yeah, right. Yeah, right. It totally is. Right. It's the guide and that's it. Like so parent need to kind of guide, keep the children. There's got to be some boundaries.
Yeah.
And I always tell
they can be simple though.
I tell parents this when they tell me, and it's typically a 13, 14-year-old. They're like, "Oh my God, my 13-year-old, 14-year-old is rebelling against me with everything." I'm like, "Good."
Yeah, that's exactly
that's exactly what it wants. That means that you set boundaries. Now, maybe your boundaries were too strict, I mean, and maybe you need to actually question them, or maybe they need to be questioned. Honestly,
maybe you should have a discussion with the kid,
right?
About
but
them.
You had to create some sort of boundary for that kid to reside in, which we've kind of just talked about this on a broader scale. We just said that we should universally agree to not kill anyone. Period. Like, it doesn't matter what they did.
It's the same exact thing.
Yeah. And so you've got to have some sort of boundaries for that kid to rebel against. And, of course, that's one of the problems. Then it's either somebody is a helicopter and the boundary is so narrow that it's not good for the kid. And now the kid's going to run amok anyways because you've made it so narrow that nobody could walk this path. Or it's going to be that you had no boundaries, and now they're certainly going to run amok.
Or in our generation, it was both of those things.
Yeah.
When the parents were present, it was some pretty strict boundaries, but they weren't present a lot. We figured out, I'll do whatever I want.
Yeah, and you're right. And the things when you crashed your bicycle,
nobody was there.
And you got hurt. Yeah, that's what happened.
That's a benefit. Yeah. That's a good.
And of course, the things that hit the news is the horrible story where the kid dies in whatever accident, and we try to keep that. But things like that. Most bicycle wrecks for a kid at that age. I'm not talking about like somebody riding on the road and getting hit by a car, like that sort of thing. But just bicycle wreck in your driveway, jumping BMX or whatever. Maybe you broke a bone, a collarbone, a leg, an arm, or whatever. Hopefully not worse. Yeah. But you also learned when I do this, it hurts, and so there's a lesson learned. Real quick, just for
you got a quote or something.
The Socrates quote. So this often on social media gets credited to Socrates, and if you Google it, it will even directly quote Socrates like as an image. I've looked it up from what I can find, and again, this is, I didn't spend hours on this. It goes back at least to, I think it was written in the 1800s, late 1800s in a newspaper, I believe, off the top of my memory. I don't remember exactly, but it's not from...
It's not ancient.
It's not necessarily ancient, but it's not from 2016.
Right.
Right? I mean, it's at
Trump
least...
did not say it.
It's at least 100 years ago, and it says, "Our youth love luxury. They have bad manners and despise authority. They show disrespect for their elders, love to chatter in place of exercise. Young people are now tyrants, not the servants of their household. They no longer rise when the elders enter the room. They contradict their parents, chatter before company, gobble up food, and terrorize their teachers." And
it should end with, "and that is how it should be."
and it's like, so of course, it's like so many people would just, say like that's what's going on, and they think that it's now, but That idea is at least 120 some years old, at least. And it's going to change over time because, like as you said, what is 1986 to you,
right?
A child now, it's whatever age. We were 14 in 86.
Yeah, I was sort of guessing on the numbers.
Well, that's fine. When we were 14 in 86, it's somebody that now is 14 in 2022.
Yeah, that was born in
the world is different. We did not have the internet at the time. Well, I mean, it might have been around, but it wasn't as active as it, and it's different. And those things change. But the things that the children do and the perspective that happens is the same.
Yeah, and I think there's some things that are different, but there's some things that are universal. And one is how we learn. And one of the ways I think we learn our identities is I'm not that. And that's kind of what we're talking about today, and maybe we can end it on this, as a lot of people get stuck. So part of our evolution of knowing who we are as individuals, who we are as people, what we believe, what we're attached to, what our values are, is we look at things and go, well, I'm not that. We're not really good about creating from scratch what we are. We have to look around, and this is basic psychology. We don't just wake up and go, I think I'm going to sail. I'm a sailor. You don't even know what it is until you see it. And so you look around in the world and you make these observations and you go, yeah, maybe I could do this. This is cool. You try it out. Oh, I'm not that. And you rebel. And so I think it's probably a universal truth, that quote, to every 13-year-old kid who's ever existed was rebelling against their caregiver because that's how they do it. Mm-hmm. Because this person is 50 and I'm 13. I have different things going on, of course. And so, but the issue we're really talking about is you're supposed to move past that. You're supposed to be able to incorporate that as a tool that we can use to figure out our identity, but there's other things you can do. And you have to forget that, I don't want to be mean to these people. I'm not saying I hate you. I don't have to kill you and shut you out of the world and say that you're evil. I can just sort of, veer. And I'm a little guilty about doing this with football because when I got beat up and bullied by the people on the football team, I said I hate football. But it was the kids. It wasn't anything to do with that. And I had, I've been making peace with that over the years. Perfect example of this,
Right.
We got to grow up at some point. Or not. We can.
Yeah, well, and that's, that probably summarizes exactly what we're trying to do is here's the things.
Yeah, right.
I think the best term are these precepts. These... Because a lot of times a tenet can be thought of more as a rule,
more
hard, fast rule.
I like that. So precept is a little softer,
precept, and
more flexible.
These are ideas that guide behavior, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, so try these things, and this is we've talked a little bit about them, and again, it's the terms I use versus somebody else, but that you have to love yourself, you have to forgive yourself in order to love others and forgive others. You have to reverse the roles in your inner relationships with people because we share the world with other people, whether we like it or not. You cannot like the fact that we share the world, but we do. And you share the air with everybody, and that's why then the decisions. And I drove a car over here. I drove a gas powered car over here today. Of course, and it's but we all choose to participate in that, and so as we all are doing that now, not to go down that road anymore. But also, so reverse the roles, and then what I say always then is remove the labels. Remove the labels. Don't just make bumper sticker judgments that this person is a Republican, this person is a Democrat, that this is a Muslim, and this is a Christian. That make the judgment on this is a Browns fan, this is a Steelers fan. That's fine.
There's not really any repercussions.
Yeah. Well, but sadly there are even.
But as a 13-year-old, you can't say all parents are dumb.
Right.
Because might be a parent one day, or you're going to be an adult.
Yeah, and it's
not true.
Take those away and get down to what really matters, and it's the same thing. So those kind of terms. This is to talk more in the future, definitely on that. Remove the labels.
Yeah.
Is also just those descriptors when you say something or you call somebody something like lazy, like entitled, like disrespectful, like physical traits, like fat. Stop that. Stop doing that. Because they might be participating in behavior that is lazy, that is disrespectful, that is entitled. They might need to shed a few pounds for health. Like that might be a true statement, but that is not who that person truly is. And if you have reached any kind of development level that is actually higher than that, if it actually, you are not going to attack that person, because if you are so, the knowledge that you have has created a wisdom for you that you are not disrespectful and you are not entitled and you don't act lazy ever, well then you better find a way to share that knowledge without attacking that person, because attacking that person, they're going to shut down. They don't want to hear what you have to say.
They're going to feel shame.
They're going to feel
Do you want
shame or anger or and that's not going to fix the problem, right? And so if they are doing that way, I really do honestly get tired of hearing like, oh, kids are entitled.
Oh yeah, man, me too.
It's like, no. Listen, they might be participating in that behavior.
Dude.
Okay, but what are we going to do about it? How do I show them like that we got to participate more? So, okay, clearly we didn't really talk about the things we were going to talk about today with reversal roles, but that's what we can do in the next show.
Well, and I think
really go in depth and like, what does that really mean? How do you do that?
Well, yeah, and whatever happened is extremely valuable because I feel like I could talk for another couple hours. So
absolutely. All right. Well, that's episode 8.
Episode 8. Whatever we call it.
Live. Signing off from the Meadowlark Manor studio. All right, man.
See you next week.